Some secrets don't just get buried. They get chosen. Chosen deliberately, with both hands, by someone who knew exactly what they were doing and did it anyway. And the worst kind of secret isn't the one hidden from enemies. It's the one hidden from the people who trusted you most. Because one day, always on the day you least expect it, the ground shifts, and everything you buried comes straight back up through the floor. This is that day. The morning of June the 14th arrived over Cambridge, Massachusetts, with the kind of sky that made photographers weep. Pale gold light poured between the historic brick buildings of Harvard Business School like something deliberately arranged for a painting. The gardens along the stone pathways were immaculate. Caterers in pressed white jackets were arranging crystal glasses beneath white tents. A string quartet was warming up near the reception lawn. It was the kind of morning that made wealth look inevitable. And somewhere in the crowd already gathering outside Burden Hall, a secret 26 years in the making was preparing to end. None of that mattered yet to Marcus Ashford. At 26, Marcus had never once questioned who he was. He was the son of Edward Ashford, the billionaire founder of Ashford Global Holdings, a $42 billion empire spanning technology, commercial real estate, and private equity that Edward had built from a single office in Providence with a borrowed desk and a level of ferocity that had become something close to legend. Marcus had attended Exeter Academy for high school. Summa cum laude from Princeton. And now, in less than 2 hours, he was going to walk across a Harvard Business School stage and receive the diploma that would mark the official beginning of the rest of his life. His whole life had been pointed at this morning like an arrow. He stood at the mirror of his private hotel suite, adjusting his collar beneath his graduation gown, when his phone buzzed on the marble countertop. His father's voice filled the room through the speaker, "Doors open in 30 minutes. The Carlisle table is set. Forbes and the Journal are both sending photographers. Cameron Brooks is here with the board. I told them to expect an announcement at the reception. Make me proud, son." Marcus smiled. He always smiled when his father said that. Make me proud. It was the oldest instruction in his life, issued so frequently and from such an early age that it had stopped being a request and become something closer to oxygen, something he simply breathed in and operated on. He pocketed the phone and reached for his graduation cap. That was when the knock came. 3 quiet taps against the suite door. Measured. Unhurried. Almost surgical in their patience. Marcus crossed the room and pulled the door open, expecting a hotel attendant, perhaps the boutonniere his mother had insisted on ordering the previous afternoon. The man standing in the hallway was no hotel attendant. He was mid-50s. Trim. Silver at the temples. He wore a plain charcoal suit with no tie, and his face carried the particular expressionless composure of a man who had delivered unbearable information before and had made his peace with the occupation long ago. He held a manila envelope sealed with red wax in both hands, extended forward like an offering at an altar. He said nothing. He simply held it out. When Marcus took it, the man turned and walked calmly away down the hallway without a single word, disappearing around the corner before Marcus could speak. Marcus stood in the open doorway. He looked at the envelope. His name was written on the front in precise, unhurried handwriting. Marcus Ashford. Nothing else. No return address. No organization. No explanation. He told himself it was a congratulatory note from someone in his father's network. Rich people communicated in grand gestures all the time. He set the envelope on the desk. He was not going to open it now. He had a graduation to attend. He lasted 45 seconds. He broke the wax seal. Inside was a stack of documents held together by a single black binder clip. The cover page had no signature. Only 4 lines, centered, typed in a plain font that made the words feel even more final than they already were. The truth about the night of June 14, 2000. Mercy General Hospital. Hartford, Connecticut. What was taken from one family and given to another? Marcus read those 4 lines 3 times. Then he turned to page 2. A photocopy of a hospital admission record. Mercy General Hospital, Hartford, Connecticut. June 14, 2000. 2 births. Same ward. Same night. Ashford, Edward and Patricia, male infant, £7 for ounces, 11:42 p.m. Second entry, Bennett, Renata, male infant, £7 1 ounce, 11:58 p.m. His hands were already unsteady as he turned to page 3. A private investigator's report from a firm out of Hartford, dated 8 months prior. Clinical in its language. Devastating in its content. It described an incident on the night of June 14 involving an understaffed maternity ward, a chaotic overnight shift change, and 2 infant boys whose bassinet identification tags were switched in the chaos before being returned to their respective mothers. What followed was evidence suggesting the error had been discovered internally within weeks, and that when it was discovered, it had not been corrected. It had been concealed. Page 6 was a notarized affidavit from a retired nurse named Carol Dreyfus. She stated that she had been present on the night in question. She stated that the hospital had conducted an internal review and identified the error. She stated that a woman identifying herself as Patricia Ashford had been contacted privately and informed of what had happened. And she stated that Patricia Ashford had been given a choice. She had chosen to keep the child she had already bonded with. She had said nothing to anyone. She had let Renata Bennett go home with a baby that was not hers, and never told her. The final page was a DNA comparison report. Sample A, Marcus Ashford. Sample B, Lucas Bennett. The findings were definitive. Sample A matched the biological lineage of Patricia Ashford. Sample B matched the biological lineage of Edward Ashford. Marcus was Patricia's biological son, not Edward's. Edward Ashford's real son was named Lucas Bennett. Age 26. Occupation, mechanic. Address, a neighborhood on the south side of Hartford, Connecticut. Marcus set the documents down on the hotel desk very slowly, the way a person sets something down when they are afraid that if they move too quickly the floor will tilt. He sat in the chair behind the desk. Outside the window, Cambridge was glittering with June light. A crowd was assembling. His father's board members were already seated in the VIP tent. There were photographers with long lenses and journalists with press credentials and $42 billion worth of legacy waiting for him to come downstairs and claim it. He sat perfectly still for a long time. And then he thought about something he had not thought about in years. A memory from when he was 9 years old. He had overheard his parents arguing in the study, his mother's voice low and rigid, his father's confused and frustrated. He had pressed his ear to the closed door and heard only fragments. It was the right thing, his mother had said. And his father had replied, "Patricia, I don't understand what you're talking about." And then his mother's voice had shifted to something so quiet Marcus couldn't catch the words, and his father had gone silent, and eventually the door had opened and Marcus had scrambled down the hall and pretended he had been reading the whole time. He had always assumed they were arguing about money. Or business. Or some merger complication he was too young to understand. He understood now. He pressed both hands flat on the desk and stared at the documents. He had 1 hour before the ceremony began. He picked the documents back up and started from page 1. 3 hours away, in a working-class neighborhood on the south side of Hartford, a young man named Lucas Bennett was tying his one good tie in the cracked mirror above the bathroom sink. Lucas was 26 years old. Broad-shouldered. Quiet in the particular way of people who have learned that the world doesn't always make room for your voice. His skin was deep amber, his eyes dark and careful, and his hands told the story of his life more honestly than he ever would himself, scarred at the knuckles, calloused at the palms, the fingernails permanently stained with grease that no amount of scrubbing could fully reach. He had worked at a repair shop on Western Avenue since he was 19. He was good at his job. He was the kind of good that comes from 10,000 hours of showing up, not 10,000 hours of talent. He held the gold-embossed invitation under the bathroom light and read it again. He had read it perhaps a dozen times since it arrived. You are cordially invited to attend the Harvard Business School class of 2026 commencement ceremony, June 14, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Your attendance has been arranged. A seat and travel voucher are enclosed. No RSVP is required. Please simply come. No name. No organization. No explanation. He had shown it to his mother, Renata, the night it arrived. She had held it for a long time, reading it with an expression he couldn't decode. He had asked her 3 times whether she knew who sent it. Each time she shook her head. But Renata Bennett had never been a convincing liar, not to him, anyway, and something in the way she held that card, something in the way her jaw set and her hands tightened, told him she knew more than she was saying. He had let it go. He always let things go with her. She had given him everything she had, and he had never once wanted to make her feel that everything wasn't enough. But it wasn't enough. And he knew it. He had known it for years, quietly, without ever putting the thought into words he might have to live with. He had never gone to college. There hadn't been money for it. When his mother's back surgery wiped out their savings account at the same time Lucas turned 21, he had quietly picked up the bills and carried them and never mentioned the scholarship applications he had quietly stopped filling out. He had told her he didn't need college. He was a good mechanic. He made decent money. They were fine. They were fine the way a house with a leaking roof is fine, functional, habitable, and quietly, constantly losing something. He straightened his tie, grabbed his jacket, and walked to the kitchen doorway. Renata was standing at the counter with her back to him, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee she wasn't drinking. "I'm heading out, Mama." She turned. She looked at him for a long moment, the way she sometimes did, with that particular combination of love and something else, something older and heavier underneath it that Lucas had never been able to name. "You look good," she said softly. "It's a graduation. I don't even know whose." She set the mug down. She crossed the kitchen and took the lapels of his jacket in her hands and straightened them slowly, her eyes cast downward at the fabric. When she spoke, her voice was very controlled. "Lucas, whatever happens today, I need you to know something before you go." She looked up. "Everything I have ever done, every choice I ever made, I made because I was trying to protect you. Because you are mine. You have always been mine." Lucas studied her face. "Mama, what are you not telling me?" She pulled him into a fierce, sudden embrace that surprised him with its intensity. She held on. She held on longer than usual. When she finally let go, she stepped back and touched his cheek. "Just go," she said. "And come back to me." He drove the 3 hours to Cambridge in his second-hand truck with the windows down and the radio turned off, and the quiet feeling that today was going to be the last ordinary day of his life. Marcus made it through getting dressed on something close to muscle memory. He had made a decision in that hotel room. He was not going to say anything before the ceremony. He needed to think. He needed time. He needed to understand exactly what he was holding before he decided what to do with it, and more than anything, he needed to look at his father's face across the ceremony without his father knowing what he knew, because he needed one more hour of being certain about who he was before everything became uncertain. He tucked the documents into the inside breast pocket of his graduation gown and went downstairs. The ceremony grounds were magnificent and suffocating in equal measure. His father's security detail had quietly arranged preferred positioning near the family gallery. Board members from Ashford Global had flown in from 3 cities. Cameron Brooks, the company's chief operating officer, a thin, precise man who ran the numbers on everything including human beings, was seated for chairs from Edward in the VIP section, and he was already scanning the room with the particular intensity of a man who had been told to expect an announcement. Marcus found his father in the pre-ceremony gathering near the entrance colonnade. Edward Ashford was 61 years old, silver-haired and barrel-chested, and he commanded rooms the way certain buildings do, not by trying, but simply by existing. When Marcus appeared, Edward gripped his son's shoulder with both hands and looked at him with a pride so direct and unguarded that Marcus felt something in his chest tear cleanly in half. "This is the day," Edward said. His voice was low. "Just for Marcus." Marcus held his gaze. He nodded. He could not speak. He found his mother next. Patricia Ashford was standing near the family gallery entrance in a cream blazer and pearls, her hair swept back, her face composed into the exact elegant expression she wore to every public event. She was beautiful in the way of women who have spent decades curating their own image. She saw Marcus approaching and her face opened into a warm, practiced smile. Then she saw his eyes. The smile didn't disappear. It faltered. Just for a fraction of a second, a micro-expression that only someone who had spent 26 years reading her face would catch. She knew. She knew someone had sent the envelope. Which meant she had known, for however long this investigation had been running, that the moment was coming. She had known and she had said nothing. Not to Edward. Not to Marcus. She had simply kept smiling and kept planning and kept adjusting collar lapels on a son she had stolen from another woman and waited to see whether the secret would hold. Marcus kissed her cheek. He felt her go still under the gesture. "You look wonderful, darling," she said. "Thank you, Mom," he said. He walked to his place in the processional line. He pressed his hand against his ribs through the gown and felt the edge of the folded documents. In the general admission section, Lucas Bennett found his seat and read through the ceremony program without recognizing a single name. He sat with his hands in his lap and watched the crowd fill in around him, families and colleagues and proud spouses, all dressed for the occasion, all carrying the particular quiet joy of people who have arrived at something they have been waiting a long time for. He was the only one in the room who didn't know why he was there. He watched the processional begin. He watched the graduates file in. He watched one young man in particular walk past, tall, composed, sharp-jawed, with something in his face that looked like a controlled detonation happening behind very still eyes. Lucas watched him take his seat. Something about that face. He couldn't name it. He filed it away. The ceremony ran its course with the measured, stately dignity that Harvard had been perfecting for 3 centuries. Marcus sat in the second row of graduates and heard approximately none of it. He was aware of his own heartbeat. He was aware of the documents against his ribs. He was aware, with a precision that felt almost hallucinatory, of the exact location of his father in the family gallery, and of his mother beside him, upright and immaculate, giving nothing away. When the dean called Marcus Ashford, the applause was louder than it had been for anyone else. A few people in the VIP section actually stood. Cameron Brooks was on his feet. The board members were on their feet. His father was on his feet, clapping with a pride so enormous and unself-conscious that it made Marcus, crossing that stage, feel like he might be physically sick. He took the diploma. He shook the dean's hand. He turned toward the audience. He found his father's face. Edward Ashford was looking at him the way a man looks at the thing he built his whole life to create. Completely open. Completely undefended. The look of a man who believes, absolutely, that this moment belongs to him. Marcus held his gaze for 2 seconds. Then he found his mother. Patricia was applauding too. But above the applause, above the pearls and the practiced smile, her eyes were doing something she had no control over. They were tracking him. Measuring him. Trying to determine, from across the ceremony ground, whether he knew. He held her gaze for 1 second. She looked away first. The reception that followed was exactly the kind of theater Marcus had been trained for his whole life. He moved through it like a professional, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, answering questions from journalists with the deflective grace that his father's PR team had spent years teaching him. And then he saw him. Across the reception ground. Standing alone at the outer edge of the crowd, holding a program in one hand, looking precisely like a man who has driven 3 hours to a place where nothing makes sense and is now calmly waiting for it to start making sense. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Deep amber skin and dark, careful eyes. Marcus went still. Something about that jaw. Something about the set of those eyes. He could not explain it. He did not need to. He set down his champagne glass and walked directly across the reception ground without excusing himself from the conversation he was in. Lucas saw the man in the graduation gown separating himself from the crowd and walking toward him with a directness that told him, immediately, that this was not coincidence. The man stopped in front of him. His eyes were hazel and they were doing something very controlled and very intense simultaneously, like a fire being managed by someone who knew exactly how fires worked. "Are you Lucas Bennett?" the man asked. "Yeah," Lucas said. "Who's asking?" "Marcus Ashford." A pause. "I think you were sent an invitation." Lucas held his gaze. "And I think you know why." "I don't know who sent it," Marcus said. "But I know what it's connected to." He reached into his gown, withdrew the folded documents, and held them out. "I need you to read these." "Somewhere quiet." Lucas looked at the documents. He looked at Marcus's face. He had spent 26 years reading people the way a mechanic reads engines, not from what they say, but from what's underneath the sound. And what was underneath Marcus Ashford's very controlled face was something Lucas recognized without being able to name it, the aftermath of an impact. A man still vibrating from something that had hit him at speed. He took the documents. "There's a garden on the north side," Marcus said. Lucas read every word. He read slowly, the way he did everything, with full attention, refusing to rush past anything. He sat on a stone bench under an oak tree while Marcus stood nearby with his hands in his pockets and his eyes on the middle distance, giving him room. He was halfway through the private investigator's report when the quality of his breathing changed. He reached the nurse's affidavit. He read it twice. His hands tightened on the pages until the edges buckled. He read the DNA report. He set everything down on the bench beside him. He did not cover his face. He did not cry. He sat very still, staring at the gravel path in front of him, and he was quiet for a long time. Long enough that Marcus glanced at him once and then looked away again. When Lucas finally spoke, his voice was level and low. 26 years, he said. "Yes," Marcus said. "I couldn't go to college." He wasn't looking at Marcus. He was looking at nothing in particular, letting the arithmetic settle into him. "I sat in the public library when I was 17 filling out scholarship applications. I got rejected from every single one. I told my mother it was fine. I went to work at the shop the next Monday." He paused. "I've been helping her pay medical bills for 5 years. The roof on our house has needed replacing for 6 years. I've got $11,000 to my name." He finally looked up. "So I wasn't poor because life was unfair." His voice was quiet and controlled, but underneath it, something enormous was pressing against the walls. "I was poor because someone decided I was easier to forget." The words landed in the garden like a stone dropped into still water. Marcus felt them hit him somewhere specific. "Yes," Marcus said quietly. It was the only honest answer. Lucas stood up from the bench. He was a fraction taller than Marcus. He stood there for a moment with the documents in one hand and the entire history of what should have been his life pressing against his chest, and he breathed through it. "Who sent the envelope?" Lucas asked. "I don't know." "Your mother knew?" "Yes." "For 26 years?" "Yes." A long silence. "Does your father know?" Lucas asked. "Not yet," Marcus said. Lucas looked at him. "What do you want to do?" Marcus was quiet. Then, carefully, "I don't know what's right yet. But I know what's wrong. Doing nothing is wrong." He held Lucas's gaze. "You should have a seat in this. Not because a document tells you so, because you were there first. And someone took that from you without asking." Lucas absorbed that. "I'm not here to take your life," Lucas said. "I want to be clear about that. I've got no interest in dismantling something just because I have the papers to do it." "I know," Marcus said. "But I'm not disappearing again either." "No," Marcus said. "You're not." They stood in the garden another few minutes. Then they walked back toward the reception. Together. Edward Ashford was mid-sentence with 3 board members and the Forbes photographer when he saw his son cutting through the crowd. He raised a hand. He smiled. Then he saw the man beside Marcus and his hand came down. Something in the quality of Marcus's walk. Something in the set of his face. Something wrong. Edward Ashford had not built 40 years of empire by being slow to read a room. He excused himself before Marcus even reached him. Marcus stopped in front of his father. He said, quietly, "I need to speak with you privately. Now." And then he said, "And I need Mom there too." Edward looked at him for one long second. Then he looked at Lucas, really looked at him, the way a man looks at something his brain is already processing faster than his emotions can follow, and his face did something Marcus had never seen it do in 26 years. It went blank. "All right," Edward said. "Lead the way." Patricia Ashford came into the room last. She stepped through the door of the small reception room off the main hall and saw Edward, and saw Marcus, and saw the documents on the table. Then her eyes found Lucas. She stopped walking. She had prepared for this. She had been preparing for it for months, she realized now, had known the moment the private investigator's first report crossed someone's desk that the timeline was closing. She had told herself she was ready. She had told herself she could manage it. She was not ready. "Sit down, Patricia," Edward said. His voice was stripped of every degree of warmth it normally carried. Just the word. Just the instruction. She Saturday. Marcus placed the documents in front of his father and explained what was in them in 3 sentences. Then he stepped back and let Edward read. The room was silent for 9 minutes. The sounds from the reception drifted in faintly through the closed door, glasses, music, the murmur of 100 people who had no idea that 40 feet away, a family was quietly coming apart at the seams. When Edward reached the nurse's affidavit, his jaw tightened. When he read it the second time, he set the page down flat on the table with both hands and looked at his wife. "How long?" he said. Patricia's hands were folded in her lap. Her posture was still perfect. The composure was still in place. But underneath it, something was visibly fracturing. "I found out 6 weeks after we brought Marcus home," she said. "A social worker called the hospital. There was an internal review." She paused. "They contacted me. And you said nothing." It wasn't a question. He was 6 weeks old, Edward. He knew my voice. He recognized my face. Her voice was very controlled. They were going to take him back. They were going to. "Stop." Edward held up one hand. He was not shouting. The complete absence of volume in his voice was somehow much worse than shouting. "I want you to hear yourself right now. I want you to understand what you are telling me." He turned slightly to look at Lucas. That young man's mother, a woman who had nothing, Patricia, nothing, went home from the hospital believing she had her own son. She raised him alone. She worked herself to the point of a back surgery that nearly broke both of them financially. He turned back to his wife. "And you knew. You sat in this family for 26 years and you knew." Patricia opened her mouth. "I saw him." The words came out of her before she could stop them. Everyone went still. Marcus looked at her. "What?" Patricia pressed her fingers to her lips. Her composure finally, visibly cracked. 3 years after. I hired someone to find out what had happened to the other family. Where they were. Whether they were," she stopped. "Whether they were all right." Her voice broke on the last 2 words. Edward's face had gone the color of old paper. "I saw photographs," Patricia continued, her voice barely above a murmur now. "Lucas was 3 years old. He was in the backyard of a small apartment building in Hartford. He had a toy truck. A pause that seemed to have no bottom. And I saw that they were struggling. I could see it. The neighborhood. The clothing. And I?" She stopped. And I told myself that getting involved would only make things worse. That the disruption would damage both children. That it was already too late to undo what was done. She put her hands flat on the table. I told myself that so many times that I eventually convinced myself it was the truth. Lucas was sitting very still across the table. I had a toy truck, he said quietly. Patricia looked at him. Tears had spilled over and she wasn't bothering to manage them anymore. I saw you, she said. And I chose Marcus. And I went home and I never told anyone. The silence that followed was the kind that doesn't just fill a room but pressurizes it. Lucas looked at the table. He thought about his mother's back. He thought about the scholarship applications. He thought about the roof. He thought about the toy truck. Then he looked up. I need some air, he said simply. He stood, picked up his jacket from the back of the chair, and walked out. The door closed behind him. Marcus left next, 30 seconds later, and found Lucas standing in the corridor with his back against the wall and his eyes closed. For a moment neither of them spoke. I'm sorry, Marcus said. Don't, Lucas said. Not harshly. Just firmly. This isn't yours to apologize for. I know. I'm sorry anyway. Lucas opened his eyes. He looked at the ceiling for a moment. What happens now depends on him, he said. He meant Edward. Yeah, Marcus said. What do you think he'll do? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. This was the question he had been turning over since the hotel room. What would Edward Ashford do? He had spent 26 years studying his father. He knew the man's patterns, the way he processed conflict, the way he made decisions, the way he drew lines. But he had never seen his father's face do what it had done in that room. He had never seen the man look genuinely lost. I don't know, Marcus said honestly. I've never seen him not know what to do. And right now he doesn't know what to do. Doesn't exactly inspire confidence, Lucas said. No, Marcus agreed. They stood in the corridor. From inside the room, muffled through the closed door, they could hear Edward's voice, low, without the anger from earlier now, something more exhausted in it, and Patricia's, quieter, and then a long silence. Then the door opened. Edward Ashford stepped into the corridor. He looked at both of them standing there side by side, and something crossed his face that had no name Marcus could identify, grief, maybe, or the particular exhaustion of a man who has just had to re-understand his entire life in the space of 40 minutes. He looked at Lucas for a long time. How old were you when your mother had her surgery? He asked. Lucas blinked. 21. You paid the bills. Someone had to. You gave up. Edward stopped. He looked at the floor. What did you want to study? If the money had been there. Lucas was quiet for a moment. Structural engineering, he said. I was good at math. I liked understanding how things held together. Edward absorbed that. Something in his face shifted. I have one biological son, Edward said slowly. He was not looking at either of them, he was working through the words as he said them, finding his way to them. And I have a son I raised for 26 years and love with everything I have. He looked at Marcus. Then at Lucas. I am 61 years old. I have spent my entire adult life building something. I built it without understanding that the most important thing I could build was not in any portfolio. He was quiet for a moment. I am not choosing between you. I am refusing to choose. I don't have the right to choose, and neither does anyone else in that room. He turned to Lucas directly. He stood in front of him the way a man stands in front of something he has no polished language for and is going to attempt it anyway. I cannot give you back 26 years, Edward said. I cannot fix what my wife chose to hide. I cannot make any of this right by writing a check. He paused. But I can tell you that as of tonight, you have a father who knows your name. If you want that. On your terms. Lucas looked at him for a long time. I'm not interested in your money, Lucas said. I know. I'm interested in not being invisible anymore. Edward nodded. Then you're not invisible. Not anymore. Lucas held his gaze another moment. Then he said, okay. The reception outside was still going. The journalists were circling. Cameron Brooks had been checking his watch every 8 minutes waiting for the succession announcement that was supposed to happen at 5 o'clock and was now 40 minutes overdue. Edward walked back out into the garden. He found his PR director and his general counsel standing together at the edge of the tent with matching expressions of barely managed concern. The announcement isn't happening today, Edward said. His PR director opened her mouth. I discovered this afternoon, Edward continued, his voice carrying just far enough for the two of them, that I have a son I didn't know about. We are addressing it as a family. There will be no statement tonight. There will be no comment to the press. And if Cameron Brooks asks you one more time whether I've made my succession plans yet, you can tell him I said the board's patience is not the most pressing concern on my list right now. He turned and walked away before either of them could respond. The drive back to Hartford that night was 3 hours. Lucas made it in silence, with the windows down and the radio off, the way he'd driven there. But it was a different silence on the return. Not the silence of mystery, not the silence of why am I here, but the silence of a man sitting with something enormous that he hadn't had words for yet. He pulled into the driveway just after 10 o'clock. The porch light was on. His mother was sitting in the old wooden chair on the front porch, the way she always sat when she was waiting for him. He climbed out of the truck. He walked up the path. He stood in front of her. Renata Bennett looked up at her son in the porch light, with her hands twisted in her lap and her eyes full of 26 years of weight she had been carrying alone, and she said, "You found out?" "Yeah," Lucas said. She pressed her hand to her mouth. "Mama." His voice was gentle. "When did you know?" She took a long time to answer. "About a year after I brought you home," she said finally. "A letter came. From the hospital. They told me there had been an error. They told me they had already contacted the other family." She stopped. "They told me the other family had decided not to come forward. That they were treating the matter as closed." Lucas was still. "They told you," he said carefully, "that the Ashfords had chosen to keep the wrong baby." "They didn't use those words." She closed her eyes. "But yes. And you didn't come forward either." "Lucas," her voice broke. "You were my baby. You were already my baby. And they had chosen to say nothing, which meant if I came forward, they had $40 billion and I had nothing, and they would have taken you from me and I would have," she stopped. "I would have lost you." Lucas was quiet for a long time. He crouched down in front of his mother so he was at her level. He looked at her face, the face that had been the first face he ever trusted, the face that had looked after him through every lean year and sick year and hard year, the face that had been carrying this secret alongside Patricia Ashford's for 26 years without either of them knowing the other was carrying it too. "You should have told me," he said quietly. "When I was old enough. You should have told me." "I know," she whispered. "I needed to know who I was." "I know, baby." He was quiet for another moment. Then he stood up and held out his hand. "Come inside," he said. She took his hand and he pulled her to her feet and walked her through the door. They sat at the kitchen table and talked until 2 in the morning. He told her everything. She told him everything. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, in the space between what had been hidden and what was finally being said, a kind of grief moved through the room and then, slowly, passed through it. What happened in the weeks and months that followed was not simple. Nothing about it was clean. Edward and Patricia's marriage entered a period so strained and quiet that the word cold didn't quite cover it. Patricia began working with a therapist. Edward moved into the Beacon Hill apartment on Tuesdays and Thursdays and came home on weekends, and they navigated the space between them with the careful, exhausted attention of people trying to build a bridge over a gap they both created and neither can fully own. Marcus went through his own reckoning. He had grown up as the heir to everything, and for approximately 3 weeks after graduation, he had the terrifying experience of not being certain what he was the heir to anymore. His identity had been a clean, unambiguous thing his whole life: son, successor, legacy, and now it had seams. Now it had fault lines. He spent those 3 weeks being less productive and more honest than he had ever been. He called his therapist for the first time in 2 years. He went for a long run every morning and tried to locate himself on the other side of the question. He called Lucas on a Tuesday. "Can I come to Hartford?" Lucas paused. "Why?" "I want to see where you grew up." Another pause. "You want to see a garage?" "I want to see where you grew up," Marcus said again. Lucas said yes. Mostly out of curiosity. Marcus arrived in a rental car, in jeans, and spent 2.5 hours in the shop learning more about combustion engines than he had ever intended to know. He was terrible. He asked questions that revealed a complete ignorance of how most mechanical systems functioned, and Lucas found himself correcting him with a patience he hadn't expected to feel and eventually laughing at him, which Marcus took with a good humor that surprised them both. When Marcus finally gave up on the engine he'd been attempting and sat on a crate in the corner of the garage, he looked at Lucas and said, "You're better at this than I am at anything I can actually do." "That's not hard," Lucas said. "No," Marcus said. "It's genuinely not." It was the beginning of something that didn't have a name yet. Not friendship. Not brotherhood. Something with its own specific shape that neither of them had a word for and weren't in a rush to find one. Edward came to the garage 2 months later. Not with an assistant. Not with a lawyer. Not with a proposal or a check or a board resolution. He came alone, on a Saturday morning in August, in a plain jacket with no tie, and stood at the open bay door until Lucas looked up from under the hood of a Ford pickup. "Morning," Edward said. Lucas looked at him. "Morning. I was wondering if you might have a few hours." "For what?" Edward looked at the truck. "I have absolutely no idea how any of this works," he said. "I've spent 40 years building things and I have no idea how an engine works." "I thought," he paused. A man of 61 years finding the words carefully. "I thought maybe you might show me." Lucas held his gaze for a long moment. Then he reached for the spare set of coveralls on the hook by the door. "You're going to ruin that jacket," Lucas said. "I know," Edward said. Lucas handed him the coveralls. Edward took them without hesitation. They spent for hours in that garage on a Saturday morning. Edward asked questions and Lucas answered them, and neither of them talked about money or legacy or DNA or the past. They talked about engines. About what holds things together and what makes them fail and what it takes to bring something back after it's been broken. When they were done, Edward's jacket was ruined. His hands were stained with grease. He stood at the bay door looking down at his hands, and then he looked up at Lucas, and for a moment his face was completely unguarded. No boardroom, no dynasty, just a 61-year-old man standing in a garage on a Saturday morning. "Same time next week?" he asked. Lucas considered. "I charge by the hour," he said. Edward's mouth curved. "I know," he said. "Send me the invoice." And for the first time in 26 years, Lucas Bennett laughed in the presence of his father. The roof in Hartford got fixed in September. Edward paid for it, and Lucas let him, and neither of them made a ceremony of it. The succession announcement at Ashford Global Holdings was postponed indefinitely. What was being built instead, quietly, without a press release, was something no board resolution could capture. Edward enrolled Lucas in a part-time structural engineering program in Hartford that fall. Not because it was a grand gesture. Because Lucas had told him what he wanted and Edward had written it down and not forgotten. Marcus visited Hartford twice more before Christmas. Lucas visited Boston once, mostly to prove to himself that he could walk into a room like that and leave feeling exactly as much himself as when he'd entered. He could. Patricia never asked Lucas to forgive her. Lucas never told her he couldn't. The space between those two things was where the work was happening. Slow. Imperfect. Honest. On a Sunday evening in November, the four of them, Edward, Marcus, Lucas, and Patricia, sat at the same dinner table in Boston for the first time. It was not comfortable. It was not easy. There were long stretches of silence and at least one moment where everyone stared at their food for approximately 30 seconds longer than was necessary. But they were in the room. All of them. Together. And the second time was easier than the first. And the third easier than the second. Because that is the only way broken things actually get repaired, not in one dramatic moment of grace, but in the quiet, stubborn accumulation of showing up again and again until the showing up becomes the thing itself. Some secrets don't just get buried. They get chosen. Patricia Ashford chose hers 26 years ago in a hospital room, holding a 6-week-old baby and deciding that love was a better argument than truth. Renata Bennett made her own choice a year later, in a letter from the hospital, holding her own boy and deciding that she could not afford to fight the family who had $40 billion and had already decided to stay silent. 2 mothers. 2 silences. 1 boy growing up in the world he was born into. 1 growing up in the world he was never meant for. And a graduation morning in June, an envelope, a garden bench, 2 strangers sitting under an oak tree, where the ground finally shifted and everything buried came straight back up through the floor. Lucas Bennett spent 26 years fixing other people's broken things in a garage in Hartford. He did it without complaint. He did it without self-pity. He did it with the particular dignity of a person who has never had the luxury of falling apart. Nobody noticed. Until somebody sent an envelope. And a young man who grew up with everything and a young man who grew up with nothing sat down together and decided that the truth, however late, was still worth choosing. Edward Ashford's hands still have a grease stain under the left thumbnail that won't fully come out. He doesn't try very hard to remove it anymore. Lucas Bennett is in his 2nd semester of structural engineering. The roof is holding. That is a story about what we choose to protect and what that protection costs the people we never see. The Ashford secret didn't destroy a family, it forced one to become real for the very first time. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who believes that truth, no matter how long it takes, is always worth arriving at. Subscribe for more stories of secrets, sacrifice, and the families we build from the rubble of the ones we inherited. And tell us in the comments, which moment hit you the hardest? Was it the envelope? The garden? Or Edward showing up at that garage with nothing in his hands?